All right, we are recording. So we are on with the fabulous, absolutely fabulous Ashleigh VanHouten. I love these conversations because we're both so passionate about strength training for women, which is awesome. And so, this is part of what we're trying to do as an institute, as a school, as a advocate for health coaching, is to try to just continue to provide ongoing training and add just supplemental oomph to what people are learning in the digital programs, because there's stuff can get lost in translation. People have questions about the stuff they're reading. They don't always know where to go to. So it's helpful to hold these kinds of things. So this is meant to be a small group. So because there's really only a handful of you, we want to know what it is you want to talk about. We had some bullet pointed things on the list here that we can absolutely just riff on. Nothing new to Ashleigh, that's for sure. But we don't know where each of you are in your consumption of this course yet, and sort of what you've already learned and what, if anything, you want to know and learn. So I'm going to ask Ashleigh to once again introduce herself just in case. And then while she's doing that, I want you guys to start sending me some questions, some of the things you really want her or us to address. Okay, so I've made sure chat is working for everyone. Everyone should be able to just kind of write in the chat. You can do it in chat. You can do it in the Q&A. Either works. But Ashleigh VanHouten, do you mind giving us another quick little bio?
Sure will. Thanks, Laura. Thank you for having me. I always love doing these chats and connecting with you. And I appreciate everybody who signs up for this course, because obviously I feel really passionately about it. And I'm glad that there are other people who are recognizing the value of understanding on a bit of a deeper level the maybe special considerations that need to be at least addressed and thought about as a coach dealing with women who are looking to build strength. So just really quickly, I won't be quick because I'm not good at doing things quickly. I'll try to be as quick as possible. But basically, I created this course with the help of the Primal Health Coach Institute, because I have been, first of all, a health coach myself for some time. I was one of the first, I think, 50 people to do the original Primal Health Coach certification. So pretty proud I'm an OG in that regard. And I've also been coached by a number of different coaches for a number of different sports and goals. And being in this industry, I'm a podcast host. I've written some cookbooks. I've written a number of strength training programs at this point. And I just kept kind of noticing over and over again that women were kind of not even necessarily on purpose, sort of just like the afterthought in the conversation, whether we're talking about actual studies and research and the people that they're studying and researching, whether we're talking about the people who are visible in the sort of authority space, the leader space in health and fitness. It just always sort of seemed like we're listening to men talk about men training, and we're meant to kind of extrapolate whatever information we can gather and hope that it applies to us. And it's not that it doesn't always. Like, part of this course, like you may have seen already, is that there are many ways in which men and women are similar with regards to health and strength training. And there are many ways in which we're different. And I think we need to just have a little bit more respect for that and understanding. And I think one thing that's really top of mind for me right now, because I am still doing a fair bit of health coaching, is the thing that keeps coming up over and over again with my female clients, my women clients, is they just want to be, listened to, understood, heard, and feel like their either challenges or obstacles or goals or whatever are being heard and like validated and understood. And I just feel like so often, from a coach's perspective, it's not something we're doing on purpose. We don't know enough about women's physiology. We aren't mindful about the specific culture that women inhabit within fitness and wellness. And so we just kind of maybe don't understand or pay enough attention to the challenges and the obstacles and the things that women face when they're looking to get stronger and get healthier. So I thought that there should be a course out there that addresses these things in a very open and accepting and sort of fundamental way, right? So that's kind of the genesis. And I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to keep learning with everybody. And I've been really excited to hear, I've heard kind of separately from folks who have taken the course and found it really good and valuable. So that makes me happy. But yeah, I'd love to hear, I think some questions are coming in, but yeah, I'd love to see kind of how far folks are, because that will have some bearing on what we talk about today.
Yeah. So everybody here is brand new to this. They bought it, but or they just haven't, they kind of want to, they jumped on here to kind of understand what it is they're going to learn. So they're either very early or really haven't even started it yet. So
yeah. Okay.
we got like a wide open.
There's so much to talk about. Yeah. Yeah.
No.
It's really wide open.
So maybe we do kind of start with these bullet points then, and we can draw connections to kind of where this stuff is addressed in the course,
Cool.
you know? So
Yeah.
the first one is understanding the importance of strength training for women. I mean, I think philosophically we can all understand why it's important, but I think unless you really understand strength training and understand the, I guess everything you were referring to in terms of lack of data, lack of research, lack of support, lack of things that are specific to women, where it's really, really important that, why is strength training important for women? And gosh, why does that even need to be stated?
I know. It sounds like, again, like this introductory statement, like why is strength training important for women? It should maybe induce like a knee-jerk eye roll from everybody, because it's like, of course. And I think too, like sometimes those of us in the industry, if you're on social media or if you're working with clients, like you'll think, could this even really be a topic still in 2023? Like, are people still confused about this? Like, is that whole trope about women shouldn't lift heavy because they'll get bulky, is that even still a thing? Or are we just repeating like an echo chamber? And I mean, the reality is it is still a thing. It's absolutely still a thing. Yes, there are hundreds of thousands of women learning about fitness, going into the gym, getting strong, learning about nutrition, learning about their bodies, and that's fantastic. There's still a ton of people who have to unlearn all of the misinformation, misogynist, like terrible misinformation that they've learned growing up about what it means to be a healthy, attractive woman or whatever, because that's the other thing, how we look is built into what fitness means for women. But I mean, from a very basic standpoint, of course, it is incredibly important for everyone to be functionally strong in whatever capacity they can, because it helps minimize the risk of injury, especially as we age, but all the time, and can help us live better lives longer. I mean, that's something Mark Sisson, I think, is a huge advocate of. It's not about living till you're 100. It's about living well as long as you can, and having skeletal muscle and healthy muscle that allows you to move the way you want to do and do the things you want to do, is incredibly important. It's not necessarily just about how much you can lift and then tell people about it later. I mean, that might be a part of it for some of us, but it's about, can you live the life you want to live as vibrantly and healthily and pain-free as you possibly can. And building muscle is really important. And because women also sort of naturally, there's a chapter on physiology and that goes into our body structures, but we don't have as much muscle as men sort of naturally. We may need to put a bit more effort, relatively speaking, into building muscle if we want to have kind of a decent amount of strength and be able to do these things. So, and I think it's not even so much that we have to force the concept of women being strong. It can mean different things to different people, and it can manifest in different ways, and it can look different. But I think part of it is the conversation around, making sure that we're talking about health and functional strength as a means of living better, instead of having it be the priority to just like look a certain way first. I mean, that's a whole other area we can go down in terms of people's goals. And, we can also go into the entire rabbit hole. There's a section in, I think, the fitness culture chapter and also the training chapter, talking about semantics, talking about understanding language, because as coaches, how we talk to our clients really matters. And understanding what they're telling us and having them understand what we're telling them back really matters. And this has a deeper layer when we're talking about women in fitness culture, because there are words that aren't used when men talk to each other about fitness. There's words like bulky and toned and all these things that men, that's not even a part of men's conversation, right? It's true. And I think when we sometimes if we aren't on the same page as coach and client, that can cause problems from the outset, because we're not feeling like we're heard or listened to on either side. So anyway, that's like another kind of rabbit hole, I guess, that I'm steamrolling into another direction. But I think it goes without saying that being strong is important, and There are different ways to get there, but strength training is so, so crucially important. And there's going to be some unlearning that needs to happen maybe from a certain subset of clients.
Right. I mean, I find, having owned a gym for a number of years, that for men, the idea of strength training and lifting something heavy, this is a relative term, folks. Heavy is a relative term, right? Depending on someone's conditioning, personal strength, body weight, goal, like all of that stuff. Men, it was very rare when I had a guy that had a problem with, when I challenged him, I think you can do a little more. Sometimes I had to actually back men down. I'd be like, I'm sorry, but your back was rounding on that deadlift. No, I'm sorry, but your back was bowing. You're doing this on the strict press. We're not going to add more weight. Whereas women was entirely different. And I think this is coming from, first of all, they've been told, again, you might get bulky. Second of all, you're going to get hurt is another one, right? Afraid of injury. The number of people that have been injured doing strength training compared to running it's dwarfed, right? In terms of the number of people that suffer any kind of injury with strength training. So to your point, we have to unwind a lot of misconceptions around this. And especially someone here mentioned in terms of they're really interested in understanding helping women in menopause, which we'll get into when we get into that kind of hormone stuff. But look, I mean, cortisol is a tremendous problem for all people, women in particular, because we tend to do all the things, right? We tend to put everybody else first, but then there seems to be a connection to women and menopause and cortisol that causes other problems. And when we're continuing to do running on a treadmill constantly, rather than the rest and digest activities that I know were kind of addressed in this course, and then using strength training as a means to build lean muscle and other things. So, I mean, there are so many components to this that can complicate things, but when you understand at the root of what it is we're trying to accomplish, it doesn't have to be that complicated. But to be fair, women are more complicated than men. And I think that's a lot of why we don't see as much research. We don't see as many people tackling it, because a lot of people are like,
Well, I mean, to that point, it's an interesting, and I'm glad you brought it up, because there are some realities that, especially hormonally, and I know someone here will talk about the hormone thing, because that is a massive part of the conversation. Our hormones are more complex than men's, because we do have this monthly cycle, because we do go through kind of greater fluctuations through the course of our life, whether we're in childbearing years and then to, perimenopause, postmenopause. There are a lot of different things happening. They can impact our everything from our mood to our body composition to, our ability to train and be strong, all of those things. This is all accurate, but there's some research, and I should have gotten this link and maybe I can send it to you, but there's some sort of newer research coming out showing essentially that when we're talking about trained athletes, like a lot of the research, like fitness related research, is done on trained athletes, that the discrepancy or the degree to which like a cycling woman or a woman in general would skew the data because of our more complicated hormones is like kind of negligible. Like there's more research coming out now saying like, that's kind of a cop out. Like this whole, like women are so complicated and so we'll just ignore you,
right.
Is really like sort of outdated. And also to that point, even if we were more complicated, that's not an excuse. We are half of the population. Respect it. Even if we are crazy complicated, respect it anyway, because it's important for us to understand our bodies and our hormones and how we can be our healthiest selves. Like just because we're more work doesn't mean it's like just throw it out the window, right? So I think that's, and another point I wanted to make is I want folks to know, I want women and coaches to know that just because maybe, again, women physiologically, culturally, all of this stuff in the fitness space, we have some differences. It's not all bad. I think that we're also like primed to think like we get pregnant, we have periods, we have menopause, we have, more estrogen, and that makes all these negative things happen and everything's bad, like there's a little bit of like doom and gloom to like,
so true.
right. And it's always just like, well, how can we get around all of the disadvantages we have. And it's not all bad. I mean, a lot of the hormonal stuff that's happening within us can be positive. It can help us in our training, it can help us in our recovery. It can help us with things like, endurance during training. Like there's a lot of things that aren't bad about being a woman trying to build strength. So I want to kind of like have that attitude as we're going through the course, and also as we're addressing our female clients, many of whom mine personally are in the sort of menopausal stage. Like, yes, this is a new stage and there might be some things happening that are different or alarming maybe, or unpleasant, or it's like a new hurdle that you have to deal with, but it doesn't have to be bad. It's just kind of a new challenge. And like, let's try to, work with it. I think we spend so much time fighting, right? Like we fight the way our body fat distribution is. We fight against, wanting to listen to our bodies when they tell us to eat more carbs. I mean, there's so many things that women are doing, generally speaking, fighting against our physiology. And then we wonder why we're tired and dysregulated and can't build muscle and can't lose fat and all of these things. It's not about, giving up and saying I'm not going to achieve the things that I want to achieve. It's about working with your body instead of against it. And when you understand your body better, you can work with it instead of against it. Right.
Oh my gosh. I love that, that recognition that so much of what women struggle with is trying to work against their physiology. Yeah. You're 100% right. Rather than just working with it. So let's kind of dig into the physiology a little. A little anecdote about strength training, especially women at an older age. I had my first 2 kids in my 20s, single babies. I gained 80 pounds with each one. Wasn't working out, eating a standard American diet. Took me over a year to get most of it off. I never got all of it off, to be completely honest. Changed my diet at around the age of 38. Matt and Mia were, 8 and 12 or 8 and 11 or something like that. Lost a bunch of weight, started training, strength training. Lo and behold, I find myself knocked up with twins at 42. Okay. So I'm like 16 years older. So I'm having 2 babies, but I had been strength training and doing CrossFit for something like 5 years by then. I only gained 50 pounds. I took off all my pre-baby weight by my 6-week appointment. Not but like I was at the same weight as when I went in on my first appointment, without exercise. I couldn't exercise because I had a C-section. Yes, but I maintained my diet and I had all this extra muscle. Ladies, I carried those babies until 38 weeks. I mean, that's practically full term for a single baby. I had twins, and I'm not, you guys, some of you see me, I'm 5'2". Like, I'm little. I don't have any room for these babies, but I had the musculature and the strength to carry those babies, right? And so, look, we've talked about this on past podcasts. I wasn't focused on losing my baby weight. I was exhausted and I had twins at home, but I just went back to the way I normally ate, and I let my body heal. And to use your term, kind of just embrace what my body was supposed to do. I mean, Christine commented, well, we create life. We absolutely do. But I have every confidence. If I had not gone through and learned how to strength train and embraced that, like, I want a strong body, I don't know if I would have been able to get pregnant at 42. And I certainly don't know if I would have been able to carry those babies that long, or had the stamina to carry these babies up and down the stair. You know what I'm saying? So having a strong, healthy body and the mindset that gives you going into a challenge that some people might think, rather than a gift, of 2 babies at the age of 42 with no sleep. Okay. So little anecdote, it matters, right? Your strength matters, and your mindset about being strong matters. That's my plug. Okay. I'm getting off myself.
Love it. I love it. And listen, ladies, if you want to hear more about this story, I actually had Laura on my podcast and we went through all of this. So maybe I should get you the link to that or something so you can like listen to the whole thing. Because I, of course, am passionate about this too. I have a 2-year-old, and just to like add my own small anecdote to it as well, knowing, of course, there's so many factors that go into healthy pregnancy, healthy delivery, whatever. I never want anyone to feel judged by anybody else's story, but I had I feel like an empowering story in that, I was doing the sort of ancestral eating and working out and really kind of taking care of my body, decided to get pregnant. I was 37, pretty simple. It was relatively easy. The pregnancy was okay. I ate lots of protein, whatever, through the whole thing. And then again, similar to your point, I had this birth. It was great, intense, but great. And then afterwards, I recovered well, but I recovered as slowly as I possibly could. And I was really, really proud of myself because I was going into this pregnancy having spent 20 years being a fitness person where all I really cared about was myself and my health and my fitness and working out. And suddenly I was like, okay, now I have this body that looks completely different, at least initially. And I really, really, really wanted to practice what I preach and say, instead of going to the gym at 6 weeks, just because I can, I want to focus on my health. I want to focus on repairing my core strength. We talk about this in the course. Pelvic health is such an underserved part of women's health that we do not talk about and people do not understand, including tons of pregnant women or postpartum women who suffer from core health issues. We don't know anything about it. No one talks about it. It should be like a mandatory postpartum care thing. But I took it so slow. I focused on nutrition. I was nourishing myself. I was sleeping. I was walking. And I'm really proud that I didn't fall victim to what, again, fitness culture tells us to do, which is bounce back quick, get back into the gym, do this, look this way. I really focused on my health. And I feel like it was good for me. It was good for my mental health. It was good for probably bonding with my kid. And so I have so many people come to me now because I've just recently been through this process. And they're asking things like, can I be keto while I'm breastfeeding? And how quickly can I get back to CrossFit and all this stuff? And I really encourage people and coaches to, when you're talking to anybody about their goals, to really kind of try to peel back the onion about, why are you doing what you're doing? Are you doing it because you feel some sense that you should? Or are you asking this question because you really want to optimize your health and well-being? And so often, again, it's this women working against themselves. I have women asking me can I be zero carb while I'm trying to build muscle? Can I lose fat and build muscle at the same time and run a marathon and all this crazy stuff? And the question is, why would you make it harder for yourself? Let's focus on what is the important thing and how can we get there in a healthy, sustainable way, And I wanted to feel like myself and get back to myself post-baby. And I knew inherently, because I researched and I studied, that no matter what the internet tells you and what social media influencers might tell you, going slow and steady is the smart way to do it. And so anyway, love talking about baby stories, but yeah, I think, and again, another thing that I was thinking when you were telling this story is I wish that there was more conversation in the fitness conversation, the women's fitness conversation that was positive, empowering stories like this, instead of oh, you're pregnant. Okay. So let's figure out how to maintain your strengths, that you look good, afterwards, you get back to it. And instead of all this negative fear mongering, which I had to battle when I was pregnant, it's more of this can you believe what you are capable of? Can you believe what you can do? And especially if you're nourishing yourself and doing the right kinds of intelligent programming, what your body can do, it's incredible, right?
Yeah.
So anyway.
So let's dive into some of these physiological and hormonal differences. One of the little bullet points in the invitation we sent out was talking about the physiological and hormonal, which are two different things. Okay, differences as it relates to building muscle and fat distribution. So maybe we should tackle one at a time, physiological and then hormonal, and understanding the difference and the impact both make.
We can start with physiological. I feel like that's probably, you could talk for hours about any of these things, but feel free, Laura, to jump in. But I think, one of the things that I mentioned sort of off the top of this call, and I wanted to reiterate here, is that this course and strength training for women I see it as sort of this coin. There's two sides, and one side of the coin is understanding all the ways in which strength training does not need to be gendered, right?
Right.
And then the other side is the understanding and respecting the ways in which women are physiologically different than men. So it can be kind of confusing because it's sort of am I saying you're different, but you're not different? Kind of. But
Mhm.
it's about, again, putting the attention in and the doing the research and understanding where we're the same and where we're different, instead of just blanket statements of, okay, well, women are different and you have cycles, so you probably shouldn't train during this time of your cycle, and you have more fat and you have less upper body muscle, so you probably just shouldn't, you should be doing like higher reps and lower weights, and you shouldn't eat too much red meat because that's heavy and that's going to be bad for your whatever. Like these blanket statements, it isn't helpful, but we do need to understand the ways in which we don't need to gender our training and our programming. So a big example just off the top is like muscle is muscle, right? There's no women's muscle and men's muscle. There's no, like, my muscle isn't going to react differently to like Pilates than a man's muscle is, right? What our muscles react to is tension, appropriate tension to our muscles. That's what spurs them to break down, and then the recovery and the nutrition is what helps them grow back stronger. So all of this, like, women should lift different weights, or it's better for us to do lengthening workouts. Like, you see the sarcasm just dripping out of my like pores when I'm talking about this stuff. No judgment against, if you like to do yoga, if you like to do Pilates, these are great. I'm just saying, like, gendering the types of workouts is not helpful, because we all have muscle. And there's actually research that shows that women can kind of react more quickly to some strength training, maybe because we do have less to start out with. So we see sort of faster gains that way. So anyway, and then, to the point of nutrition, which is another entire chapter, obviously, protein is important for everybody. Fueling appropriately is necessary for everyone. Making sure that you are not only eating enough, the bare minimum to cover your body's survival and processes, but then on top of that, if you want to perform in the gym and build muscle, you need to eat more. These are all things that apply to everybody. But okay, Christiane, I'm taking forever to build muscle. I'm 32. Okay, so we'll talk about it. But, so these things are the same across the spectrum. However, because of conditioning and misinformation and marketing and all kinds of terrible things, women historically maybe have a harder time eating enough, eating more, eating protein specifically. To your point, having a harder time maybe going into the gym and lifting with the intensity required to build muscle, not because we're not capable, because we've been maybe taught to be afraid. We've been taught that it's not good for us. We've never actually been maybe pushed to the point of knowing what it takes, the intensity that it takes to build muscle. So anyway, I just wanted to get that off the top, that like there are many ways in which we're the same, and it doesn't need to be complicated, right? These foundational primal principles of like, strength training, compound lifts, multi-joint movements, simple, repeated, progressive overload, proper recovery, eat enough, these things apply across the board, right?
Absolutely. And Christiane, I would love for you to give us a little more context, because so sometimes you think you're not building muscle because you're confusing. So here's the thing: there's a difference between hypertrophy and strength.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I'll have you handle that.
Yeah, that's another.
But there's also so a difference between hypertrophy and strength. But I also had another thought there. Some of it too is that you're expecting when this muscle grows a certain look, that if there's still some overlying body fat, you're not going to have that striated look. That's all diet. That's something different. And depending on where you are, again, you're 32 and kind of what your hormone. So there's a lot of moving parts that go into that. But as Ashleigh was kind of talking about hypertrophy and strength training, feel free to add any color to your comment. Go ahead.
Yeah. And also some of it too is like, how are we measuring? I'd be interested to know how you're measuring. Like, is it weight on a scale? Is it just, measurements? Is it like in-body DEXA scans or whatever? Because sometimes these things can give us different outputs. But yeah, that's another point too, is, even clients who may still have these crazy outdated notions of getting bulky, which we can talk about until we're blue in the face, right? Like, no one gets too muscular by accident, literally no one. It is not going to happen. But even if you are afraid of that, you can tell your client you can get stronger without getting bigger.
Right.
That's the difference between hypertrophy and strength training. Hypertrophy is growing your muscles. Strength training is getting stronger. And those require different, you can do both at the same time. You don't have to. And they require different training programs. They require different focuses, right? So strength training really is about efficiency of movement. It's lifting the heaviest weight possible in the most efficient way. Hypertrophy, which I like to just kind of, maybe another word could be just sort of bodybuilding, is not usually about moving things efficiently. It's about stimulating muscle growth. So sometimes that's, it's usually higher volume. It's sometimes moving a weight in a way that is on purpose inefficient so that you are stimulating the muscle more. So if you think about, for example, I don't know, something like a barbell clean from your like hips to your shoulders versus like a barbell curl. A clean, you're doing strength. How efficiently and quickly and well can you move a heavy weight from down here to up here? Whereas a curl is you're using brute strength, like you're using your biceps in an inefficient way to bring that weight up. That's going to build the muscle more. So anyway, I mean, you could go a lot into that, but there are two different things. You don't have to do both, and you can absolutely build strength without getting your muscles bigger if that is a concern of people's, which it does still tend to be.
And for those of you that maybe don't know what a clean is or what some of these things are, while Ashleigh's reading Christiane's response, a clean is going to also use your quads, right? It's going to use a little bit of your lower body in order to create momentum. And then you're going to use your hips to come through to create more momentum. And then you're going to shrug your shoulders, and then you're going to pull this bar up. So you are strengthening all sorts of different aspects of your body. And it's efficient, and all of those areas are going to get stronger the more you do it and the heavier you go. Whereas a bicep curl is literally you're isolating a specific movement. So that's a great example.
Yeah. So Christiane's saying, I mean, this sounds like some positivity as you're sort of maybe explaining it a little bit more, like you're seeing some muscle definition. I wasn't getting hypertrophy until a couple months ago. I've been lifting weights since 2020. It's been a long journey. I think I was doing a lot of HIIT for a year or so. Yep. And now I'm focused on 3 to 4 days of lifting and some sprint days, and I'm seeing results. I mean, it sounds like you're moving in the right direction. I think it's also kind of a misguided thing in the fitness industry that we think like, there's so many like 12-week programs. It's like, just because it's a 12-week program doesn't mean you're going to have all the muscles you want in 12 weeks. It's just it's a foundation. Most people are training for years and years and years and years, and you will see progress. And there are many ways to gauge progress, check progress. There are a lot of different things you can do. And I think another big problem that we have is we rely way too much on what the weight on the scale says. And I hate it. And I feel like you and I had a mini rant about this the last Zoom call that we did, because it's another one of these, we've been taught for so long that weight is a thing that we should be ashamed of and scared of, and seeing the scale go up is the worst possible thing that could happen, when there are so many better ways to gauge your health and your success and even how good you look. I have tons of clients who have started eating better, training more intelligently, and they gain a couple pounds. And then when I tell them, like, get rid of your scale for a hot minute and go like put on a pair of jeans and take a picture of yourself, or even measure a couple things, whatever, there's all the different kind of ways you can check your progress. Weight is like the worst one,
right?
Because as you're gaining muscle, you're probably going to gain weight. You're probably not reducing fat and building muscle at the same scale, depending on what your, prior first goal is. And you can, and the other thing too, is like, it doesn't matter. The scale, you only see it. Maybe if a doctor has to see it, but generally, if you're getting on a scale once a week and looking at it and getting upset over it, like, you're doing it to yourself and for no good reason. Use it as a data point if you can without being too stressed out, but it's one data point and it's not the best one even, and if you worked really hard for a year and you ate well and you trained well and you look like $1 million and you got on the scale and it was 10 pounds heavier than you wanted it to be, would that ruin it for you? That would be such a shame if it did, because that number means nothing to anybody but you, unless you're training for a, weight specific sport, which I think isn't applicable to most people. Right. So I would really encourage both clients and individuals to just, if we can, part of it is the education part, right? And this is another thing that's so important about this course for me is I really feel like education is, of course, empowering. And the more we understand how our body works, the less we demystify, the less it's confusing and scary to us. And also the more sort of empowered and confident we feel. So we don't have to be freaked out by gaining a couple pounds. We understand the mechanics of how this is going. And when we focus more on what are we accomplishing, what are we gaining, how are we progressing, versus these one or two metrics over here that people have taught us are so important, it changes the game, really.
I love it. So physiologically, there are some. So there's a lot that really doesn't need to be gendered. But there are some differences in terms of kind of muscle fiber and just like our bone structure. So let's just a couple minutes on that. Let's move into some hormones, because I know we've got a lot of questions about that and we only have so much time. So let's do a quick hit on that.
Yeah, I like some of these questions coming in. So, I mean, really quickly, and again, these are considerations. They aren't necessarily 100% accurate across the board, but generally speaking, women's skeletons are a little different than men's. Obviously, again, we create life. So we've got wider hips, which not only is going to make our shape look different, but it also creates like a slightly different angle of our femurs. So our hips to our knees, that ratio is going to look a little different. It's like if you've ever, small things that people don't notice until maybe you've like read this course, but like if you and your brother or your husband or your friend or whatever, who's a guy, you're like walking out of the grocery store, you've got big, heavy, like grocery bags, you're carrying them down at your sides and yours keeps smacking into your hip. And the guys are just swinging freely because anyway, our skeletons are shaped differently, right? So there's the sort of hip to knee ratio that's a little bit different. Ours kind of go in at a more intense angle than men's. And then we've got sort of the opposite situation happening with our rib cage and our shoulders are smaller, relatively speaking. So the angle from our shoulders to our elbow is going to be a little bit different. And all of this really means, it doesn't even mean like your squat has to look different or your shoulder press has to look different. It's just kind of understanding that the best setup or the best exercise for you is the one that you can do the proper range of motion comfortably, pain-free, and it may not look the same as your male counterpart or trainer or coach or husband or whatever. So these are things to kind of consider. It's also why it's not necessarily as easy for a woman to have this inverted triangle shape, right? Like we naturally, most of us are going to have a relatively like wider hip to shoulder ratio. It doesn't mean you can't build big, strong shoulders if you want to. It doesn't mean you can't, lose some body fat and change the shape of your body if you want to, but these are things that are natural and healthy. To the point about fat, we carry more fat in our hips and thighs and the backs of our arms, whereas men tend to carry more in their stomachs, which again, some good news. This is healthy fat that is, again, there for mostly for kind of carrying children, right? Healthy. Right. Yes. So it's like keeping us alive and our babies alive while we're having babies, but it's a healthy fat that, of course there's some nuance to this, but generally speaking, if you're within a healthy body fat, that is healthy fat. There's nothing wrong with it being there. It's not bad. And it is often the last fat to lose when you're trying to lose fat because we have greater relative distributions of fat in these areas. So knowing that it's not just you didn't just eat too much. And so now you've got this extra fat or these love handles or these hips or these thighs that you don't like. This is healthy, appropriate body fat distribution, right? And it is actually healthier, generally speaking, than the visceral stomach fat that men tend to accumulate as they gain weight that kind of sits in around the organs, which can cause a lot of cardiovascular issues. And that's why men tend to have higher risk of diabetes. Yep. So if I can be so blunt, having a fatter butt is not always bad. Right? It's like there's some protective stuff there. So things like that to know. I mean, muscle fiber, again, like I did say, muscle is muscle, and that's true. Women tend to have a higher relative ratio of type 2 slow twitch muscle fibers than compared to type 1 fast twitch than men, which is why you may kind of hear things like women are relatively speaking better at like higher reps, endurance, and maybe slightly less good at like really intense, powerful like short bursts of power. And again, relatively speaking, that's true. It doesn't mean you can't train for power. It doesn't mean you can't train for max lifts and dynamic, powerful training. It's just something to think about that, we can, for example, there are studies showing that trained women are just kind of women who are not like new to the gym. That may be a bit of a vague statement, but it's women who are trained. They go into the gym and train, so they're not like new. They can lift heavier, higher reps relative to their their max weight. So if my max squat is 200 and this guy's max squat is 200, I might be able to squat 185 5 times, where he might only be able to squat it 2 or 3 times. And all of this is to do with our muscle makeup. There's evidence that our estrogen and different sort of female sex hormones can help us recover faster. I mean, I guess that's the hormone side of things, but basically the physiology is different. Lots of it is good news, but it's things to know so that when your client comes to you and says, I just want to lose the belly fat, we have to be honest in showing like, you can't spot reduce fat. This is our bodies are shaped this way for a reason. We hold fat in different places for a reason. Here's how we can talk about nourishing you properly and training properly if you want to lose some body fat and gain some muscle. So anyway, that's kind of a very brief overview of that.
Do you want to tackle these questions first and then we'll jump into some hormone stuff? There was one in here about understanding how much protein to eat. And then also, how do you feel about women using creatine?
Yeah. So the creatine one first, I feel good about it. I use it.
I use it.
Yeah. It's, and again, this is another one where it's like creatine is creatine, good for everybody. It's one of the most widely, exhaustively researched health supplements around. There are virtually, and again, knock on wood, I'm not your doctor, do your own research, but in my research, there are virtually no side effects. In terms of like, I think it used to be, I don't know if it was like back in the 80s, 90s, like old school bodybuilding where people would like creatine load and they'd take like extra doses and they'd retain water and all of this stuff and they'd be bloated. But there's no negative side effects. It's shown to help you recover faster so that you can train better. Again, it's not a magic pill that's going to make you have more muscle. It just helps you train better and recover more effectively with consistent use. And it also, there's evidence showing that it helps with like things like focus and cognitive clarity and stuff like that. So it's a really, really important, I think, supplement that you can, of course, get through food too. There's a lot of creatine in animal products.
Right.
But most people, I think a lot of people are supplementing with it. It's a relatively cheap and inexpensive supplement as far as a lot of these things go. If you are able to and are interested in it, I don't think there's a downside. To taking creatine. I think it's good. Okay, the protein thing. So we do talk about this, and in the course, pretty exhaustively, we talk about nutrition, of course, and not only we dive into macros, we dive into how to build a meal plan, how to build a meal, how to determine the ideal kind of template of all of these macros for your clients, and how that is a moving target and it needs to be adjusted and changed based on their changing goals. And some of it is trial and error, right? Like you can create a foundation and then you need to communicate with your client to see how it works, right? Like I'm going through this with my clients. I'm working with them to create meal plans and like guidelines. And then I'm relying on them to come back to me and say, this either feels like too much or this, I don't like eating this much at this meal. And how do I adjust? Because again, we're trying to find an optimal diet. An optimal diet isn't just how much protein am I eating? It's, is this something that's sustainable and not a chore and not horrible and something they're not going to be able to keep up for more than a couple of weeks while I'm watching them, right? But anyway, going back to the protein thing. So, I mean, a general, very, very basic starting point is about 1 gram of protein per pound of either lean body mass or like ideal body mass. So again, if you're 150 pounds and you want to lose 10 pounds, maybe 140 grams protein, give or take, right? It's going to be different from day to day. It's okay if you're one day it's 115 grams and one day it's 150. But it's important to kind of start with the protein. I think a lot of people, because it's the heavier It's the
Mhm.
heavier macro. It's like, it's so intense. You think about this big piece of steak or chicken, you're like, this is so much. That's one of the biggest challenges I find a lot of women who are typically coming in undernourished, under eating more protein is the hardest thing. And it's also the most important thing. It is the most important macro. And it has a thermogenic effect where it takes a lot of energy to digest protein. So it's kind of a good thing. It's like helping you sort of, I don't know, it's like revving up your metabolism, it's burning calories, and it's also giving your body the amino acids and the protein that it needs to build your body. But so that's kind of a moving target. I mean, again, I don't know, like that's it.
Yeah.
I think
I
I
would
said,
agree with you too. I mean,
I
I
think,
think there's a
yeah,
lot of, I think research that I've read as well, and other people that are kind of in our space too, that make a similar recommendation
yeah,
to what you just said.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, yeah. So, and again, this can change. It can go up and down a little bit, but the biggest thing too is people get caught in this perfectionism mindset of like, I need to eat 140 grams of protein a day. And like, I'm dealing with clients who, when they start actually tracking temporarily their food, they're like, I was eating like 60 grams of protein. So I'm like,
Right.
okay, you don't need to eat 140 grams of protein tomorrow, but
Mhm.
eat more than you did yesterday, right? It's like
Right.
this progressive thing with training, with nutrition, with working on rest and recovery when we're dealing with people who are like, constantly exhausted and overworked and cortisol's all messed up. We aren't trying to fix everything tomorrow. Our bodies don't work that way. Our brains don't work that way. Behavior change doesn't work that way. So we just want to work progressively towards focusing on protein, making protein the focus of every meal, trying to get certainly, I mean, I would say pretty much every woman should be eating over 100 grams of protein a day, somewhere between 100 and 150, probably for most of us, and making that the priority, and then adding in healthy fats that work for you. And then the carb conversation is a little bit more specific to you and your background and your preferences and your goals. But one thing that we do talk about in the course is, things are so divisive right now in the fitness and nutrition world. And there's still all these articles about like how bad meat eating is and how we should all be plant-based and all this stuff. I think we need to not demonize any particular style of eating, any particular macro.
Right.
We really want to just focus on nutrient density and foods that are appropriate for you, foods that you enjoy, foods that you digest well, and foods that give you the energy and the nutrients you need to do the things that you're trying to do, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I love it. Sheila, are you asking about glycine in reference to strength training or muscle building? Is this just a general question? Fill us in on that unless you've got some points there, but.
And do you mean sort of like collagen supplements? There's a lot of glycine in collagen, or just like specific, like glycine is a very pulled out specific supplement.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to, she said general, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in terms of muscle building, the leading one that I've always read most about is leucine. That's really the one that stimulates it the most. And glycine, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that's an essential amino acid. Our body can make it unless something's wrong.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the same for a lot of proteins that we are still supplementing with, because taking into account the fact that we are not always eating
enough.
the best diet, but there is glycine, like collagen, I believe, is largely glycine and leucine. So if you're taking a good collagen supplement, if you're taking even a good whey protein, if you're eating animal products, and this is going to be individual, like we actually have a little supplement in the course about supplements, and ones that maybe you might want to look into, some overarching ones that address some of the like major deficiencies that people have, like vitamin D is a massive one, magnesium is a massive one, and we do kind of dive into that. That's a bit more, again, bio-individual, because it kind of depends. Like, is your client or you plant-based, or do you not eat a lot of red meat? Do you not eat a lot of eggs? Have you had a deficiency in any of these things in the past? Are you having trouble building muscle? Generally, a lot of this stuff isn't necessary if you're really optimizing the other things in terms of really eating nutrient dense, resting, training appropriately. But that's not to say that glycine may not work for you. And it's again, from what I know, I don't think that there's a tremendous harm in taking it, right? So if it's something that you want to try, you can do that. But it's not something I'm recommending a ton.
Right.
Um,
Let's dive into some of the, just at a, because all this stuff is in the course as well. So, but let's touch a little bit on kind of hormones, and maybe we focus on, because there seems to be, I'm focusing on perimenopausal women too, and menopausal women, maybe just a brief introduction of how it changes over a life cycle and why perimenopause and menopause are so effing frustrating, so hard to figure out.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm like staring down the barrel of some of this myself. So we'll see. But I guess the thing is, perimenopause, from the research that I've done, and this course is not, we're not experts in the hormonal aspect of it. That's like a separate profession. But what we wanted to do with the course was touch on, as you said, sort of the basic hormonal fluctuations that occur during a woman's life cycle, what you can generally expect, and generally what you can do to sort of optimize each stage. And then also there's a bit of a conversation about when you may want to consider having the conversation with your client about like referring out to an expert, right? If there's something that just seems like, maybe I can't give you all that you need, right? So there's that kind of conversation that happens in the course. But I think what makes perimenopause so difficult is that it's this period of just fluctuation, right? So if you have your health generally pretty sorted out during your kind of reproductive years in your 20s and 30s, you're hopefully having a pretty regular, pretty uneventful period. Sometimes it's annoying, but like it's there and it's your friend, and like it tells you things about your body, and that's important and that's great. And you kind of know what to expect from month to month, even if you have a day where you're craving chocolate or a day when you're tired or whatever, what's coming. And then even with menopause, hopefully, once you've sort of hit your stride in menopause, which is really kind of like a leveling off of hormones and a period of low hormones, even that, once you've entered into it, it's also sort of predictable in a way. But perimenopause is just like all over the place. You're getting periods, you're not getting periods. Like this is up and this is down. And it's really a transition, and it can last a while. So of course, and you're getting these symptoms potentially. Some people get worse than others, and some people have a relatively mild time, but it can be extremely frustrating when you feel like you've worked all these years to like optimize your health, optimize your hormones, everything's great, you've got things sorted out, and then suddenly you're doing everything you used to do, but you're having a different result because your hormones are fluctuating wildly, right? And again, the biggest advice, and no one wants to hear this because it's not sexy, the biggest advice at all stages is to keep doing what we tell everybody at every age, right? But I think that maybe some people kind of hear different things. They hear like, as you get older, maybe you need to, I don't know, tone it back and don't strength train as much anymore, or you don't need to eat as much because you're not working as hard and you're not whatever. It's incredibly important, especially for women. As we age, we're losing muscle. We have a higher risk for things like sarcopenia and osteoporosis. So muscle wasting, bone loss, bone density loss, all of these things, anemia, all that kind of stuff. So we need to continue and potentially ramp up our focus on protein, nutrient dense, ideally animal-based protein sources, weight-bearing exercise, walking, hiking, strength training to the degree that it's appropriate for you, building that skeletal muscle that keeps your body operating well. Recovery and rest becomes increasingly important. Our bodies, our hormones we do it all the time, but they don't like being run ragged, right? And they react poorly to it. So, and I think this is another thing I want to touch on quickly. We don't have a lot of time, but we have a whole chapter on recovery. And this relates to women of all ages because stereotypically, and it's a cultural thing too, we have a really hard time easing up, relaxing, taking a break, not doing everything. And it's really, really important as a like holistic, mindful coach that you are if you're programming for your client, you are programming for the context of their life, not what they tell you they can do in the gym. Okay, well, let's beast you in the gym because you're raring to go and you want to do a bunch of HIIT workouts or whatever. You need to work within the context of their life. Like, where are they hormonally? How is their sleep? Do they have 3 children and or independents at home that they're taking care of? Do they work shift work? Are they crazy stressed out all the time? Their training is going to be different, you know? So these are all things that are really crucially important. It's recovery and resting your body so that it can actually repair and do the things it needs to do to operate well. When your body is in a high cortisol sympathetic state all the time, your hormones are not going to react well to that, right? So, and it's, I mean, again, this is advice that works for every stage, but maybe you need to tweak and pay more attention as you enter into stages like perimenopause and menopause. And, you know, this is a separate kind of topic. And I don't know if we touch on it too much in the course. This may be kind of something separate that you guys want to research on your own, but HRT, like hormone replacement therapy for women, is something that has been really taboo for a really long time, unnecessarily. We don't have enough time to get into it, but there was some like really misleading, outdated, kind of crappy research that came out that sort of told some stories that people have then run with for decades that have scared women away from even approaching this subject, whereas it's completely not taboo and very common for men as they age to talk about with a proper, you know, medical, like a physician, about HRT, hormone replacement therapy. It's an option. It's a potential thing that some folks may want to look into as they age. But, you know, long story short, it's like the same tenets that we talk about for everybody to do. You got to keep doing it as you age. Yeah.
What I found, look, I mean, I'm 52 and my body can't decide if I'm menopausal or perimenopausal. I'm still, because apparently, according to my doctor,
you're perimenopausal.
It starts over. So, yeah. So here's what I have found is as I've gotten older, my body tolerates nonsense less and less. So it's just less forgiving of the excursions I used to enjoy even just 10 years ago, right? That if I decide to go hog wild on some ice cream or whatever the case may be, my body does not recover from it the way it used to.
Yeah.
So declining estrogen, declining progesterone, but declining testosterone causes, so our body, it just makes us, then my recommendation is always to lean into these principles even harder. Yes. That it's even more important that you get enough protein. It's even more important that you've got enough healthy fats so your brain can function, because that's the other thing with perimenopause, the brain fog, the lack of focus, the fatigue. Your body needs to run on some energy, and processed carbohydrates are your enemy when your hormones are declining. Doesn't mean all carbohydrates are your enemy, but processed carbohydrates do not work. The other thing I found is my body is less forgiving of CrossFit workout after CrossFit workout after CrossFit workout. And I hear the same thing of the Orange Theory and all of these F45s, all of these like, and you need to be there 5 days a week. Your body is less forgiving and it needs more time to recover. It's not that you can't do those workouts, but you need to do something else in between those workouts to allow your body to recover. And in terms of HRT, I started it too. My biggest concern is this drop. Look, the average life expectancy, I don't know, 50 years ago was 56. It was 56. It's now 75, right? Or whatever it is. I'm 52. So I refuse to live the next 20 years feeling like a wrung out mop.
I'd be dead already, Sheila's saying.
You know, so they're bioidentical hormones. The hormones they're using these days are not the same as the ones before. Also, the biggest thing is they were using these hormones and these treatments on already ill women, much older women, well into menopause, late 60s and 70s, and they were already sick. And then they wonder why their outcomes weren't good, versus starting women in perimenopause in their 50s, or even, I would even say early 60s, as long as you're healthful. And again, these are different medications. And what I have noticed is, I mean, the hot flashes thing that kind of went away, but really the thing that bothered me the most was the brain fog and the lack of energy, because then I can't work out and build muscle because I don't have the energy to do it. And I did not have the patience to wait for menopause to finally come through. Go through all this. So that was the choice I made. It was right for me. I spoke to my doctor about it. It might not be right for everybody, and all of that is fine. But the course does dive into hormones so that everyone that takes it can understand the general picture of what's happening. What happens during the various phases of your cycle if you're still menstruating? And a lot of people want to know, okay, so how do I dial in my diet and how do I dial in my workout? And our last call, we were like, I'm sorry, but even the same one, unless you're on like a pill, I guess, but every woman, your cycle might be kind of sort of similar, and you can kind of sort of guess where you might be and be super targeted at. It's so hard to do that.
Yeah.
Versus relying on how you feel and what your body is telling you to do is a much better indicator than being like, I'm on day whatever of my cycle.
Yes.
So I'm not going to do X workout, even though I feel like a rock star right now. Like that's just kind of silly.
Yeah.
But anyway, I mean, I'm hoping that you guys dive into this course, get a ton out of it, and then just provide us with some feedback on what else we can do. Because we're already talking about how we can continue to make this great, these webinars included. Like,
and I know we have to jump off, but one thing, because Christiane just asked about recommend focusing on one muscle group each lifting session rather than full body. I'd love to do another webinar that's like just about the training, because the training and recovery, like we did talk a little bit about nutrition and hormones and women's bodies and stuff, but like I'd really love to talk about the training thing, because I think there's just so much to unpack there that we didn't get to. So I'd love to throw that in the next time we do a webinar.
Okay. Yeah, I'll hit up Jane and we'll get it on the calendar, and we'll do one on just training instead of all this other stuff. Yeah,
because there's so much, as you guys can tell. Yeah.
I know, we could keep talking for hours.
Yeah, that's just us though. You and I can always keep talking.
That's true. All right, everybody, I'm going to let you go. Ashleigh, I'm going to let you go because Ashley's not at home. She's off visiting. So I'm going to run. Let us know your thoughts, your questions. Enjoy the course. And Ashleigh, as always, it's been awesome.
Thank you so much, everybody. I appreciate you being here. And thanks, Laura. We'll do this again soon.
I hope so. Bye.
Okay. Bye.